South Africa has been facing a huge challenge when it comes to state-owned enterprises. Parastatal's wasteful expenditure has been on the headlines for quite a while. Now, former trade unionist and cabinet minister and businessman turned philanthropist Jay Naidoo, who last week published his memoirs, joins us this morning to talk about politics, corporate governance and the future of the tripartite alliance. Thank you so much, Mr. Naidoo, for joining us this morning. I suppose you'll always be a unionist at heart, though. It's not fair to call you a former unionist because the issues of social transformation and an economy of inclusion still plague us.
Thank you, Cindy, and absolutely. I mean, I am... the issue of social justice really sits very closely to my heart. And those are challenges that face us continually into the future across the world. At the moment, I'm chairing an international foundation that is challenging malnutrition and hunger that faces 2 billion people in the world. And it's remarkable that in the modern age, the 21st century, more than 1 billion people will not have enough food to eat when they go to bed tonight.
And the frustrating thing, I think, when you look at Africa as a continent being the provider of at least 80% of the world's riches or wealth, that we're still the poorest continent. And this would speak to the critical leadership, be it politics or the will to transform or reform certain legislation to benefit the masse.
I agree again, absolutely, because it comes back to the issue of values. What do our leaders want to do to deliver on the promises they've made to our people? We are the richest continent, and yet we sit with many of the world's most pressing social and human development challenges. So it has to come back to the issue not so much of regulations or do we have formal democracy, but what are the values? You know, recently in the World Cup, we embraced the world. Yet we struggle as a people to embrace the many poor that sit right here in our midst. And this is the challenge that faces us here today in South Africa and in Africa. Can we put the poor at the center of every policy or decision we make across every sector?
We're taking your calls at home on 011-5379-332 or 011-5379-333. In studio, we're joined by a trade unionist and a former cabinet minister and now businessman and philanthropist, Mr. Jay Naidoo, taking your calls on corporate governance and what your views are on the tripartite alliance. We have seen divisions, and I think it's unfortunate because starting out really and trying to create a more cohesive, inclusive society that's non-sexist, non-racist, etc., seems to be falling along the wayside. The 1950 Bill of Rights that was signed, do we even refer to that in our engagement as the tripartite alliance?
You know, I don't think we must shy away from division or debate or robustness of views. I think this is really healthy for democracy, for us to have this debate on a tripartite alliance, because I was the one that led COSATU into that alliance. It was very easy in those days. We were fighting for power. We were fighting a just struggle. And I've always said that the fight for power is easier than the exercise of power. The tripartite alliance today has to have a focus on the issue of joblessness and corruption and education and what are the issues that really matter to us as a nation. And I think that, you know, for us, there's no sacred cows about this, you know. We must look at things very objectively and say, what are we doing? Is it achieving what we set out to do? And so for me, the issue of the tripartite alliance is very important as a cement that holds together South Africa, the commitment to non-racialism, the commitment to doing something about the poor. And I think there's going to be a robust debate within that. I still believe that the alliance is important. But if the alliance doesn't do what it set out to do, it's not a sacred cow for me.
Yes. And are you of the view as well that the tripartite alliance is almost its worst enemy, because now it depends largely on which camp you may be in, and you know that person would then either be supported or not make it on the next election list?
You know, Cindy, we are not unique in the world, and we must stop thinking we're the center of the universe. These divisions that you see exist all over the world. You know, one of my greatest problems about transformation in South Africa is I think there's no problem with elites. People should go out and build businesses and through honest work become wealthy. I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is a predatory elite. They corrupt state officials, they steal licenses, they buy and sell tenders. This cancer is what will destroy us as a country if we do not act against it. So I think that's our challenge today.
And it goes unabated because when you think about it, again, it's depending on your political clout. If you're a CEO of a particular parastatal, not necessarily singling out any leadership, you would get away with murder. You know, we get the reports, we get the audits, and there's a discussion around it, and then it simply blows under the cover.
But Cindy, there are many state institutions. I've chaired the Development Bank of Southern Africa for 10 years. I've just stepped down. It's a remarkable organization. It works. We have 600 people who are engineers and project managers working on thousands of projects, and there are many state institutions that work. The important thing to understand is the shareholder. The government appoints the boards. And a part of the problem, yes, is the way in which some boards act, and particularly leaders of boards, but part of the problem is political interference by the shareholder. So it can't just be a blanket blame that the problems of state-owned entities is a problem of the management or the shareholder. We have seen state-owned institutions that are core to our economy without leadership. Where does that problem sit at? So I think we must have a really focused debate about what is right for these institutions that are so important for the South African economy.
I think we'll talk about whether they live up to their mandate, though. Let's just go back to our callers now. Moyo and Sibukeng, thanks so much for holding, and what's your view?
Yeah, in Africa, my point of view is to say, why don't we unite our leaders? Why don't we just make it as if it's United States of Africa? Unity is the main issue. We have riches, but then it's just promises. Our leaders that are leading us, they just promise. Once he's on the position, there's nothing he can do.
All right,
just
thanks.
for himself, corruption is too much.
All right, thanks so much, Moyo. 011-5379-332 or 9333. Taking your calls. We're here with Mr. J. Naidoo. Now, just coming back to the mandate of these state-owned enterprises in having access and low tariffs, you know, for the general public. Would you say it lives up to its mandate, most of them?
Well, I think most of them do live up to the mandate. I think there are problems, like they will exist within a private sector or even civil society. So I think we've got to confront these issues very openly. I come back to this issue. What is the role of a board of an institution? It is to supervise, and it is to set the strategy and the vision and measure the management against milestones. The role of a chairperson of a board is not to get involved in the engine room. Part of our problem of why state-owned enterprises are in a lot of trouble today is because we have people not involved in the management of that institution, involving themselves in how decisions are made. So I think we've got to understand and have a debate about the roles of the shareholder, which in this case is the government. What is the role of the board? What is the role of management? And a lot of confusion arises because people mix up their roles.
Which master are you serving is the question. Let's go to another caller now. Irene, hello to you. Hi there, Irene and Kimberley. Morning.
Morning, Cindy. And
yes.
Good morning, Jay. Yeah, I wanted to comment that South Africa has a lot of money for all of us. The only thing is that there are too many thieves in government, and as a result, it affects service delivery. Thank you very much.
Your response to that?
Well, I think corruption is a critical issue. I mean, we must be blind not to understand what Irene is saying. At the grassroots level, people are selling tenders. They are adding cost. For me, the biggest challenge for us as a country is that we are giving tenders to tenderpreneurs, as Vavi calls them, and these people have no skills, no capacity. Ones with the capacity are not winning and eventually close down their businesses. So what we are destroying in this country is the companies that have capacity, deliver proper houses or bridges or roads, and then eventually add to the growing economy. In fact, there's a predatory elite I talked about that doesn't have the capacity, that will not deliver, they will deliver shoddy houses or roads that get washed away in one torrential rain. And that's what we've got to act against. And I think that the issue of corruption should be at the center of our debates as a country.
It's good and well, because we do get it from the Jacob Zuma administration as well at any given public speaking opportunity where the corruption issue is spoken about. But what are the mechanisms? Are there criminal charges laid against these predators, as you call them?
Yes. No. I mean, if I really look at it, I mean, SAA is an example, which is an exception rather than the rule. But which company has been put on a tender blacklist in our country? Which senior official has been charged with corruption? And so I think this is where we're talking. And that's why I'm saying I'm back to where I started as an organizer. We need strong social movements that demand accountability, that demand performance, and that we must reject mediocrity. We have rights in this country that we fought for and that are in our constitution. And that's what I'm saying, is that we as students and parents and community members should be demanding today.
We certainly need to strive to protect the freedom. Let's take our caller now on the line. Hello to you. Andres, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm okay, man.
I'm good, thanks. Carry on.
Yeah, you know what, I'm just complaining about this government. If you can see, there's a lot of money here. But the problem, there's too much corruption, especially from the courts.
All right, thanks, Andres. We get the gist of it. I think we shouldn't necessarily dwell too much on corruption. There are other issues that we'd like to ponder on as well. We'll continue taking your calls just after the news headlines. In studio, we have trade unionist and former cabinet minister and businessman turned philanthropist, Mr. J. Naidoo, and we'll take your calls on 011-5379-332 or 9333.
Get that drink somewhere.